Well, welcome to another Friday night. We've been looking at this deeper look at the 60 characteristics of complex trauma. And today we come to one that for many is quite baffling for them and frustrating for them. And it's that people from complex trauma tend to sabotage good things that are happening in their life. They sabotage successes, relationships that are good. They can sabotage their sobriety, even their health, and they go, what's going on here? And so that's what I want to look at today. And I need to say up front that when we talk about sabotage, for many it can be subconscious. In fact, for most it's probably subconscious. It can be conscious, but it is often subconscious. And then there's another dynamic. A lot of people can, in one part of their brain, know that they're sabotaging something good and not want to do it and hate that they're doing it, but they can't stop themselves from doing it. And that is very confusing and frustrating for them. So let me just give you a very basic definition to begin. When we talk about sabotage, it means to deliberately destroy or damage or obstruct something. Somebody has said this: self-sabotage is when we say we want something and then go about making sure it doesn't happen. And that is a common occurrence, reality within complex trauma. So let me give you two examples of what I've seen probably the most frequently in this area of sabotage. So the first is a person who has a history of bad relationships. And then they start learning about their trauma, working on themselves, healing, growing, and they meet somebody that they think is quite healthy. They gradually get to know this person, and they like what they're finding out, and then they have their first disagreements, conflict, and they work through that well with new tools. They're both growing and being authentic, and the relationship is deepening and getting closer and closer. And then all of a sudden, they find themselves pulling away from the person, or saying hurtful things, taking shots at the person, or avoiding their phone calls, or even canceling dates and making up excuses. They're sabotaging that relationship. Sometimes consciously, sometimes they're not even aware that that's what they're doing. Why is that? And then the second example is a person in recovery from addiction. So they are really working on changing, not relapsing. They're learning new tools, they're building new things into their life to help them grow in their sobriety. And they start to get their good things happening. They get their kids back. They get a good job. They get a good relationship happening. They're reconnected with some of their healthy family members. Good stuff is happening. And then all of a sudden they find themselves wanting to reach out and connect with old friends who are still in the problem. They find themselves thinking about some of the good old times. They're sabotaging. What is that all about? So let me give you 16 possible things that motivate or are underneath why we sabotage. So the first for many people in recovery is guilt. Deep down, they have never forgiven themselves for what they've done, some of the terrible things they've done to hurt others. And so they don't truly deep down believe that they deserve a good life. And so whenever good things start to happen, their guilt says, you don't deserve this, you should be punishing yourself. And so they sabotage. And then shame, deep shame, which believes I'm not good enough. Once they start to grow and get healthy relationships and get good stuff happening, they go, that's not the real me. I'm a fraud. I'm an imposter. I need to make my circumstances match how I see myself, which is a failure. That way I won't be a fraud. So shame can play a part. Then for many children growing up in complex trauma, whenever good things were happening in the family and there was a time of peace and it looked like somewhat happiness, something bad always happened. The other shoe always dropped. Dad came home drunk, angry, and all hell broke loose. And they began to experience that as a pattern in their life. When things go smoothly, the other shoe's going to drop very soon. Something bad is going to happen. And so now they carry that belief subconsciously into adult life. And when things are going smoothly, their brain is saying, uh-oh, the other shoe is about to drop, so let's just make it happen. Let's get it over with. And they sabotage the good stuff. Third, you can take that to the relationships and what we refer to as the cycle of violence. So in a violent, ongoing relationship, you have the outburst of violence, and in the early days, that is followed by a time of a honeymoon where everybody wants to make up for hurting each other, being angry at each other, and they're on their best behavior. They're very super sweet to each other. But they don't deal with any problems that come up because they're afraid if they point out the problems, it'll take the honeymoon away. So they just stuff everything down, which means pressure starts building. And as pressure builds, it finally gets to a point where there's another outburst, and that's the cycle. So a person who's been in that cycle for a long time, they get past the honeymoon, they start feeling the pressure build, and they go, you know what? Let's just sabotage stuff, push buttons to get the other person angry and violent so we can get back to the honeymoon. So sabotage is their only tool that they know to get back to a honeymoon type relationship. And then for many from complex trauma, they grew up in chaos. They grew up in unpredictability, in things not being consistent. They grew up with emotional dysregulation everywhere, problems everywhere, things not resolved, problems piling up. It was chaos. But that was their normal. So now, when they're out of chaos and they're building a healthy life with a healthy routine, with structure, there's not a lot of chaos. And it feels weird, it feels boring, it can even feel wrong, and it creates a little bit of stress. I don't know what to do with this, and so they sabotage to go back to chaos because that feels normal for them. Somebody has said this: self-sabotage is like a game of mental tug of war. It is the conscious mind versus the subconscious mind, where the subconscious mind always eventually wins. So that early programming, which is your subconscious mind, has tons of power, and if it doesn't like what's happening in the conscious mind in the present day, it will sabotage to bring it back to what it's used to. Next one, anger. So if you think of somebody that you love and you're so angry at them, you want to hurt them because they've hurt you. And so what do you do to hurt them? Well, let's just sabotage my life and fail and mess up. That'll hurt them. That'll break their heart. So I'll hurt them by sabotaging me. And sadly, a lot of people do that. Some grew up in a very rigid religious system that taught that pleasure, too much pleasure, was wrong. It was a sin. You shouldn't be enjoying things so much, you should be only enjoying God. And so, enjoying stuff too much, that was selfish. That was wrong. And so now, for some people coming out of that, when they're going along and enjoying food and sex and activities and enjoying life, they start to feel, I'm sinning. And they sabotage it. But then there's fear. And there's lots of fear behind sabotage behavior. Fear of getting your hopes up. So a child who wants to be loved by dad, but dad keeps being neglectful, abusive, they try to please dad. They try hard to be the perfect child. And dad seems nice and they get their hopes up, and then dad is mean again and their hopes get dashed. They go through that over and over again, but every time they get their hopes up that maybe dad will love me this time, dad neglects them or abuses them. So they realize that what hurt was not just dad neglecting and abusing them, but also that their hopes were dashed again. And so getting your hopes up is dangerous. And so now, as soon as they're in recovery and things are going well, they go, should I start hoping again that my life will finally be a better life? Oh, don't get your hopes up. And so they sabotage just so they don't have their hopes dashed. Then, fear of getting hurt. This relationship is growing, but if it keeps growing, they're going to hurt me at some day, and I don't want to get hurt, so let's just sabotage the relationship now so I never get hurt. Meanwhile, you're hurting yourself. Or fear of failure. This job is going well, but pretty soon I'm pretty sure I'm going to get in a situation where I'm going to fail, so let's just sabotage this job so I never fail. Or fear of success. Your life has been chaos, failure, hardship. Now things are going well. You're being successful in relationships and jobs and parenting. But that feels weird. It's a change. It's unknown territory for you. And you don't like unknown territory because you don't know what to expect, and you might get hurt or you might fail. So success is actually a stressful thing. And so you go to, it's better to live in the hell I know than in the paradise I don't know. So let's sabotage the paradise and go back to the hell I know. Somebody has said this, our biggest enemy is our own self-doubt. We really can achieve extraordinary things in our lives, but we sabotage our greatness because of our fear. And then there's the fear of trusting somebody. So we go into recovery, and we've been hurt so much by people, we've decided not to trust anybody. But then we realize we can't do this alone. We need relationships, we need support, we need help. But that means trust. And I don't want to go there, so let's just sabotage recovery so I don't have to trust anybody. Another thing that can happen when you come into recovery, when you've come out of chaos, is in recovery, all this new stuff, the unknown, is you feel out of control. And you don't like the feeling of not knowing what's going on and not feeling in control. And so you sabotage it to go back to what you think you can control. Your normal chaos. Another one is just not wanting to sit in uncomfortable emotions. So think of it this way. You meet somebody, and I sit down with you and tell you, before you're going to be able to know if this is the right person for you or not, you're going to have to go through 6 to 12 months of slowly getting to know them. That means 6 to 12 months of sitting in uncertainty, not knowing, the unknown. And that feels unsettling. We don't like that uncomfortable feeling. And so people go, well, if I can't know today, on the first day I met them, whether they're the person or not for me, I'm not willing to sit in the unknown, so I will sabotage that just so I don't have to sit in those uncomfortable feelings. And another one is people come in to recovery and they realize that means responsibilities. I have to take care of my own needs, my physical, emotional, spiritual, relational needs. I need a job. I have to pay bills. I have children who are depending on me. Responsibility. I need to be involved in helping others in service. Responsibility. And if they have trouble saying no, then they can take on too much stuff. And after a while, it can start to feel overwhelming. But instead of disappointing people and saying no and backing out, they go, this is way too much. I don't like all this responsibility. Let's sabotage it all just so I can have a holiday. Just so I can go back to no responsibility. Now here's what I want you to notice about what I've shown you so far. Do you see that all of those were your limbic brain being uncomfortable? Fear, uncomfortable emotions, guilt, shame, anger. So it's your limbic brain, when it's triggered, that plays a big role subconsciously in getting you to think you should sabotage. And so that limbic brain, we're going to come back to, but I want you to understand this is a limbic brain thing that is happening here when we talk about sabotage. Now let me give you another reason why people sabotage, and it's what we refer to as pain confusion. And so it's thinking, being confused about pain, thinking that bad pain is actually a good thing. So some people grow up where they are made to think that love equals pain. And so, in order to have true love, I need to be in pain. So let's sabotage relationships so there's pain in the relationship. Pain confusion. Others, pain is their normal all their life. They haven't been able to resolve pain. They've lived in pain. And so what they don't realize is when something becomes your normal, there's a certain comfort to it. There's something very familiar that just helps you feel, okay, this is good. And that can happen for some people when it comes to pain. And then another one is a person who's a cutter or a self-harm person. It releases the body's natural opioids, and it makes you feel better. So pain makes you feel better. So if good things are happening, let's self-harm, and that'll make us feel better. Pain confusion. Others from complex trauma have shut down their emotions so much that they just feel dead inside, empty inside, and they need some pain to feel alive. So let's sabotage, because I don't know how to experience and enjoy positive emotions. I just feel dead all the time. But the only thing that makes me feel alive is when I am in pain. Pain confusion. Others, pain is something I can control. Again, the cutter thinks that. So let's sabotage stuff and create pain because I can manage pain. For others, I've got so much guilt, I need to create pain in order to get justice. I need to punish myself in order to get justice. I need to inflict pain on myself in order to get justice. Pain confusion there. And then for some, pain gets me attention. So I hate pain, but I like pain because everybody is empathetic towards me and looks up to me, and that becomes the martyr complex that some people have. Now, having given you all of those reasons why people sabotage, I want to just take you to this area. A number of years ago in the DSM, the diagnostic manual used by psychiatrists that basically seeks to write out all the things that would be classified as not normal human behavior, things outside of the normal. So back a while, they used to have something in the DSM that isn't there now, and it was called self-defeating personality disorder. And that is taken out, but it's basically what we're talking about today, and it comes out of complex trauma. And so what definition and criteria are, it's a pervasive pattern of self-defeating behavior beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts. So there's 4 different ways that this self-defeating personality disorder can manifest itself. Number 1, a reluctance to seek pleasurable activities. So I'm not going to let myself enjoy life. Secondly, an encouragement of others to exploit or take advantage of myself. So I'm going to seek out friendships where people use me and abuse me. Thirdly, a focus on one's worst personal features. So I'm not going to look at myself accurately and say I have strengths and weaknesses. I'm just going to focus on everything wrong with me and how terrible I am. And fourthly, a tendency to sabotage one's good fortunes. So basically, people from complex trauma would be diagnosed back then as having a self-defeating personality disorder, because many of you have all 4 of those characteristics. So let me expand that into 8 different examples. And again, many of these will be subconscious for you. So, first example, you choose people and situations that lead to disappointment, failure, or mistreatment, even if you have better options available. So you have all kinds of job opportunities, service opportunities, friend opportunities, and you, for some reason, pick people who are going to disappoint you and hurt you. You pick jobs that aren't ideal, that are going to leave you frustrated, even though you have other options. Very interesting. Secondly, you reject or make ineffective the attempts of others to help you. So when others want to help and be part of your life and support you, for some reason you reject them. Thirdly, following positive events in your life, new achievements, you respond not with happiness, but with depression, with feeling guilty, or by doing something that causes you pain, that punishes you. Very interesting. Fourth, you incite angry or rejecting responses from others and then feel hurt, defeated, or shame. So you are out with friends, and for some reason you push buttons to get them mad at you, to get them to say, "Get out of here, you're nothing but a jerk." And then you go home all upset, but you brought it on. Next one, you reject opportunities for pleasure, or you're reluctant to acknowledge enjoying yourself. So you're in social settings, you have a wonderful time, you've got all the skills to be able to have a wonderful time, but you don't take advantage of those opportunities. Or if you're in one, you are reluctant to admit you enjoyed yourself. Next one, you're uninterested or you reject people who consistently treat you well. So if people are nice to you, supportive of you, kind to you, for some reason you just don't want them in your life. You reject them. Then you fail to accomplish tasks crucial to your personal objectives despite having the skill set necessary to do so. So you know what you need to achieve this job, this goal. You have the skills to do it, but you don't do it. So you know what you need to do to pass this course, and you have the skills to get an A+ on the exam. You help your friends study for the exam, and they get an A+, but you don't do it yourself. All of those things, you go, what is going on? And then the final one, you avoid or undermine pleasurable experiences, reject opportunities for pleasure, or reluctant to admit that you enjoyed yourself. So even when life is going good, you're looking for why it wasn't good, why you didn't enjoy yourself, the negative. You're finding something to make it less than a pleasurable thing. Isn't that interesting? So what I want you to see there is what comes out of complex trauma is a person who is a contradiction in one body. They want this, but they keep sabotaging it. They keep doing self-defeating things. So the question is, how do we change that? I don't want to keep doing that. So let me go to the healing, and it begins, I think, with self-awareness. Because so much of this happens subconsciously, we need to bring to our conscious mind our patterns in what we do. And sabotage always begins with self-defeating behaviors. So begin to know your self-defeating behavior patterns. And that will become for you an indicator or early warning sign when you spot, oh, I'm in a self-defeating behavior. I must be sabotaging. And you can stop it before you get to the sabotage. So let me give you a bunch of self-defeating behaviors that you can be aware of in yourself. So going back to an old behavior that you know is not good for you, you know that even though it might give you some instant gratification, the long-term consequences are going to be disastrous. So let me give you a bunch of the old behaviors that you can slide back into that are actually self-defeating behaviors, even though they give some instant pleasure. So you stop caring for yourself physically. You stop exercising. You stop eating well. You stop growing mentally. You stop keeping track of how you're doing emotionally and managing your emotions. You neglect yourself spiritually. When you start neglecting all of who you are, you're sliding back into self-defeat. Or if you slide back into criticizing yourself all the time, putting yourself down, letting that inner critic in your brain yap away all the time without shutting it up, that can be sliding into self-defeating behaviors, which can lead to sabotage. Or if you slide back into perfectionism, that is actually a self-defeating behavior. If you slide back into self-pity, victim mentality, poor me, everybody else just fix me, help me, and I'm just going to sit here and do nothing, that's a self-defeating behavior. If you begin procrastinating again, or comparing yourself to others, or withdrawing socially and going back into isolation type behaviors, or engaging in risky sexual behavior, or refusing help from others, not wanting to be a burden or pain. All of those things, self-defeating. If you start overspending again, going on little shopping sprees for stuff you really don't need. If you begin taking shots in relationships or sabotaging by withdrawing, overeating, undereating, self-harm type behaviors. If you start sliding back into some drug, alcohol stuff, and for many people who are addicts, if they find themselves sliding back into smoking again, that is a danger sign for them. For some, when they start swearing more than normal, their language gets a little more colorful than normal, that is sliding backwards. Others, letting parts of your daily routine slide. Oh, I'm too tired to do my prayer and meditation today. I'm too tired to go to a meeting to talk to a sponsor or a friend. You let stuff slide just a little bit. Or you start staying up later than you normally do. You start telling little white lies that you haven't been doing. You spend more time in mindless distractions, even though you have lots of responsibilities you should be doing. You contact somebody from your past that you know is not good for you. All of those are sliding backwards, self-defeating behaviors. Know what yours are and catch yourself before it goes too far. Secondly, mindfulness or curiosity. So when you see yourself sliding back to an old behavior, a self-defeating behavior, don't just immediately go to getting mad at yourself and judging yourself. Be curious about it. Why am I doing that? What is the fear about what's going on in my present life? Is there a fear that the other shoe's going to drop? That something bad is going to happen, I'm going to fail? Or is this a guilt thing? Is this a shame thing that's cropping up again, that's driving me going backwards? So, understand you're asking questions to figure out what is triggering my limbic brain to want to sabotage, so that I can get back into my cortex, parent myself out of my limbic brain back into healthy living. And this is a struggle. This is not easy to do, especially when your limbic brain has been triggered. And then not only ask about the emotions behind it, but ask what lies is it wanting me to believe about relationships, about success. Confront those lies and get back into the truth. So I hope that helps you, because I think for everybody listening to me, you understand this sabotage stuff. But if you've been growing in your recovery, you're tired of the damage you're doing to yourself and others by your constant sabotaging. I hope this gives you a path forward to begin to change that, but know that it is a slow, gradual growth process in stopping this sabotaging behavior. That's the end of part 1. We're going to take a short break, and then I'll be back to do the Christian part. Again, this is optional. Don't feel any pressure that you need to stay around. We're not offended if you want to leave now. We'll see you next week. For everybody else, we'll be back in just a minute. Well, welcome back. We're getting close to the end of the story of Joseph. And last week we left him where the famine is happening in Egypt and all over the world. Joseph is second in command in all of Egypt, in charge of all of the distribution of food now in the famine years. And his 10 brothers have shown up from Israel wanting food. They don't recognize Joseph because they haven't seen him for 20 years. The last time they saw him as a 17-year-old shepherd boy. Now he's 20 years later dressed in all of the majesty of the Egyptian regalia in a very officious position. And they bow before him and don't recognize him, but Joseph recognizes them. And they ask for food. First thing I want you to see is at that moment, Joseph realized that the dream he had had as a young boy just came to pass. That his brothers would bow down to him. The thing they had made fun of him about for so many of his growing up years. Now, what I want you next to understand is that Joseph immediately launches into a pre-prepared plan. Something that for the last 20 years he's been thinking about. And what it seems very clear is for the last 20 years he's going, okay, I think my dreams are going to come true. So what am I going to do when I meet my brothers again? When they bow before me, what do I want to say to them? What do I need to find out about them? And so Joseph has given this a ton of thought. And so the first thing he has decided is, I want a relationship with them, but only if certain conditions are true. And that means I can't reveal my identity to them until I find answers to some of these questions that I need answered. And so that is his plan. So what does he want to know? 2 basic things. Number 1, please tell me about my dad and about Benjamin. I only see 10 of you. Benjamin's not here. Dad's not here. How are they doing? He wants to know that. But he can't come out and ask that because that would reveal his identity. Secondly, have you guys changed? Are you sorry for what you did for me, to me, and to Dad? Would you do it again if you had the opportunity? Or have you truly changed? That is essential in Joseph's mind, is I can't have a relationship that's healthy with them unless they've changed. And so he has thought through a plan, a very detailed plan about how do I find out this information, number 1. And secondly, how do I find out if they've changed? Now what I want to say before I get into his executing of the plan is we are told that when Joseph first meets his brothers and he sees them bowing before him, that he has to excuse himself from the room for a while because his emotions come flooding to the surface and he's breaking down. He's losing it. He is just overwhelmed by emotions, and he's got to go out into a separate room by himself to compose himself before he can come back and face his brothers. And what that tells me is there's some deep stuff going on here. What is happening inside of Joseph that is causing this huge emotional response? I can't even begin to imagine all of the emotions. But I wonder if in that moment as he sees his brothers, hundreds of memories flash back through his mind and all the pain of his growing up years and all of the pain since he was 17 just washes over him again. Maybe there was some anger still about some of the things his brothers have done. But maybe there was just an overwhelming desire to have a relationship with them, to see them change because of the love that he had for them. Maybe there was just gratitude to God because he was seeing his dream fulfilled. God had been faithful to him. All kinds of emotions just taking over. But let's go into the plan. So here's what happens. When the 10 older brothers arrived, they bowed before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph recognized them instantly, but he pretended to be a stranger. And he spoke harshly to them, "Where are you from?" "From the land of Canaan," they replied. "We have come to buy food." Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. And he remembered the dreams he'd had about them many years before. He said to them, "You're spies. You've come to see how vulnerable our land is." "No, my lord," they exclaimed. "Your servants have simply come to buy food. We are all brothers, members of the same family. We're honest men, sir. We're not spies." "Yes, you are," Joseph insisted. "You've come to see how vulnerable our land has become." "Sir," they said, "there are actually 12 of us. We are all brothers, sons of a man living in the land of Canaan. Our youngest brother's back there with her father right now, and one of our other brothers is no longer with us." So Joseph decides to come on with his harsh response and to accuse them of being spies. And he does it 3 times. What's that all about? What happens when you're in a foreign country and you are brought in before an authority and accused of being a spy? You are on the defensive, scared, and want to do everything possible to prove you're not a spy. And so you're going to give them tons of information just to prove that you're not who they say that you are. And so it's Joseph's way of getting them to talk. And so what do they start saying? "No, we're not spies. No, let's tell us about our family. There's our dad, and we got a little brother." "Oh, and what's Joseph going? Dad's alive, Benjamin's alive." And he's learning this information. Okay, good. And so he's finding out what he needs to find out. But then he goes to, okay, now I know Dad's alive, and I know Benjamin is alive. Now I want to know if they've changed. Now here's something that's so interesting to me. When we've been looking at the story of Joseph and how his brothers were planning to kill him and then decided to sell him into slavery, we were looking at it from the perspective of the trauma that Joseph went through, the pain that he went through. But as Joseph looks at his brothers and he wants to know if they've changed, he's not just thinking of, would they do it to me again? He's thinking, would they do it to Dad again? Would they put Dad through the pain of it again? And what we realize is something about Joseph's heart. He wasn't just thinking of his own trauma. He loved his dad, and he was so aware in the days after his brothers sold him to be a slave in Egypt, how that affected his dad. That his brothers went back and said, "Dad, Joseph's been killed." They lied. And it would have crushed his dad because Joseph was his favorite son. And Joseph for years has carried the pain his dad went through. And so in his mind, I have to find out 2 things. Would they do it to Dad again, or would they do it to me again? And so what he needs is he needs to have Benjamin, who's now the favored son, brought down to Egypt, and he needs to make it look like Benjamin is going to be taken away, and he wants to see how the brothers respond. Would they be concerned that if Benjamin is put in prison or killed, would they be concerned about how it would affect Dad? Would they be willing to just go along with that and not care about Benjamin? And so that is the next part of the plan. And so Joseph is saying, how do I get them to bring Benjamin back? And so, as he loads them up with food after having accused them of being spies, and they have emphasized that they are honest men, Joseph says this: as I said, you're spies, but this is how I will test your story. One of you must go and get your brother. I'll keep the rest of you here in prison. Then, when you bring your brother back, you will prove to me that you are honest, that you have a brother, and that you're not spies. So that is what's now behind, how do I get Benjamin back? But then he decides, I'm going to keep one brother in prison and let the other 9 go home. But then he puts all their money back in their food sacks. And that, when they go to their first night and they unload and they're going to feed their donkeys, they find all their money in their food sack. And they go, oh no, that would prove we're not honest men. We really better bring Benjamin back to prove that we are honest, and we better bring all this money back. And so Joseph has put this plan into motion. And it will eventually provide the answers he needs, that his brothers have truly changed. They would not put their dad through that again. They are truly sorry. They would not do that to Benjamin, even though they did it to Joseph. And that's when Joseph reveals that his identity and the relationship can be restored. But here's what I want you to think about. For 20 years, Joseph's been thinking about this plan. For 20 years, Joseph has been processing how his brothers hurt him and his dad. Do you know, sadly, what some people would have said to Joseph? Joseph, you must have a resentment because you're thinking too much about this. You're obsessively thinking about it. You must not have forgiven your brothers. And they would have judged Joseph. And Joseph is going, no, this is nothing about not forgiving my brothers or having a resentment. I want a relationship with my brothers, but I can't have a relationship unless they've changed. And I need to figure out how to find out if they've genuinely changed. And so sadly, a lot of people misjudge people who are processing stuff after a deep hurt and say you have a resentment when that is not necessarily the case. So I hope you see that this was an extremely emotional time for Joseph. I bet you he was just exhausted afterwards, but he couldn't sleep because his mind was just spinning. Let's just pray. Father, thank you again for this story. We just see the wisdom of this young man, his common sense, his realism about what makes for healthy relationships and the criteria that must be met. And just thank you for teaching us through this. Amen. Okay, that's the end of another Friday night. Thank you so much.